What is your biggest concern about education in this time of COVID-19?
What is your biggest concern about education in the time of COVID-19?
My biggest concern is how the students are impacted. I think a lot of people still have the idea in their head that school has to happen in the school building. And I feel like if certain issues aren't addressed and certain things aren't thought all the way through, that it could risk not only the students' health, but the staff's health.
I think for me, my biggest concern for education is just like the connection that I feel will be broken between teachers and students, between parents and teachers. I just feel like our district kind of struggled with communication before this. So being isolated and being kind of limited on how you can communicate with one another.
I think my biggest concern about education in the time of COVID-19 is how some kids are just going to be falling behind.
As a teacher, my biggest concern has been the inequalities of access to education and to my students. So I do not feel as though I was able to reach as many of my students as I would have effectively liked to. And a lot of that is due to lack of access to technology.
We are expecting children and families to be able to have access to the internet and to have access to time and help if we're going to be continuing virtual learning into the fall.
They have a lot of trouble signing in or a lot of trouble finding the right place for the right time. And also just because kids are not disciplined on their own, they need like an adult to be over their shoulder. And we can only do so much from the other side of the screen to make it engaging. We do also need the support of parents and possibly the school to make sure that we can have everyone involved.
It wasn't necessarily a lot of parents didn't want to do it. They were confused and overwhelmed by all the different platforms we were on, giving them paper versus being online. And then also with coronavirus and everything happening, expecting parents to come up to the school.
Growing up, I was one of those students who always had to go to the public library to use a computer for schoolwork. And I know there are plenty of students out here who do the same. And with everything shut down, they've had the lack of access to those computers and that internet. And I am very concerned about how they've been keeping up.
None of us were prepared for COVID, of course, but not having the tools all the way to really, teach in a broader online platform was really hard. But once we got into it deeper, I did get a lot more participation towards the end. So just the hope is that when and if we do return to school, I really want to take that time to be able to work with my students with technology and getting them prepared for virtual learning.
Especially for those younger critical ages where they're learning how to read and they miss a lot of that. They're going to come into a new year having lost a lot of knowledge that they had, or just being behind in general because we didn't get to cover even half of the content material that we wanted to do these live lessons.
I would say I'm most concerned with the widening of the achievement gap that is occurring during this time.
More so than ever, some people may have it rougher during quarantine than others. So I'm afraid that those who don't have a really good plan during COVID might fall even further behind than what they already were.
So it just seemed like certain schools in certain areas where parents were already familiar with online platforms, already had their own laptops and things at home, and good working internet. Parents who had less children, they seemed to excel a little higher. And it was very difficult with me having ESOL students. It was difficult even kind of trying to explain things through my parents who English wasn't their first language. So trying to figure out how not to intimidate them, but also explain to them what their child should be doing and what they're expected to be doing. That was a challenge.